Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opus WealthStyle podcast. My name is Iván Watanabe here with my partner, Evan Wohl. Evan, good morning, man. How are you?
Doing great. Always great to spend time with you.
Always nice. Always nice. So we're very excited today to have a conversation with Garlande Patz. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Garlande?
Correct, yes.
Patz. And Garlande is the head of absence and disability practices for the group benefits department over at Guardian, and we're really, really excited to have you on today, so appreciate it.
No, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it as well, and timing is good.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're having the conversation today. I think it's extremely relevant for a number of our clients and sort of our listening audience, either that have already had kids or thinking about having kids. I know my wife and I sort of went through this process of trying to figure out what maternity leave benefits are, right? Whether with her organization, through the state, through the government, what's protected, what's not. It's like, unless you really understand it, I feel like it's a black box of misinformation. And so we're really excited to have you on today to just try to translate this into English for our listening audience and to make it as streamlined as possible. Now, I know, as you and I have talked about, every state's a little bit different, every company's a little bit different, so we're going to try to keep things a little bit broad, but really give folks a path to kind of figure out their underlying sort of benefit options, right?
Absolutely, Iván. And no, I appreciate it. And I mentioned earlier, the timing is good for many reasons. One, I do this every day, right? And I still find it to be complex, to be complicated. But personally, I'm actually 39 weeks pregnant. So I have
congrats.
Actually, thank
Congratulations.
you. Similar to you and your wife, I'm going through a lot of this myself right now. And I was actually talking to my husband the other day because he's working on filing his parental leave and everything. And it made me think, I do this every day and I can help him through this, right? I know what questions he needs to ask, but for people that don't, wow, it's a complex landscape. So I'm really glad that you're shedding light on this. I think it's an important topic, and there's a lot, I think, to demystify around the topic. So hopefully I can bring some awareness and, like you said, help streamline the different benefits that are at play.
Awesome. Really, really appreciate it. I think, you and I have talked about this before. It seems like the first place for somebody to start after I'm assuming once you figure out you're pregnant, you start all the conversations start to happen. You start to figure all this out. Where would you recommend the best place to start is when you find out?
Yeah, it's an exciting time, right? But it's also overwhelming. You're like, where do I go? There's all this information. You go online, and that can be even more overwhelming because there's so much out there. And like you said earlier, it's different for everyone. It's different based on where they live, where they work, what kind of industry they're in. So there's a lot to consider. The first place I would recommend is an internal company site. So a lot of times, there's a company intranet site with all of the employee handbooks, policies. Take some time to go through those. I know a lot of times, we get them at the beginning of the year, we scroll through, acknowledge that we've read them, but taking some time to actually go through and say, okay, what are the different benefits that are offered to me? Company benefits is one piece of it. State benefits is another piece. Mm-hmm. We're seeing an uptick in parental leave, so that would be a company-sponsored benefit. One of the challenges that companies face is this remote work environment that we are now, many of us are in, whether it's a hybrid or fully remote, and having employees spread out across the United States. So the reason I bring that up is that, HR really is your best friend when it comes to navigating this landscape and getting that support from them. Like this is their job. That's why they're there. But you also want to do your own research, because a lot of times HR teams, especially for smaller employers, right? Like they're experts in a lot, but these state programs are evolving daily. I mean, literally daily. So knowing, for your specific situation based on where you live, the benefits that are available to you through your state is also important. So there's the state benefits, there's federal benefits too. So there's a lot, and I'll go into each one of those as well.
Is there a central resource that you recommend, or it's just they're going to each state website to look for the details?
Yeah, so Evan, a lot of carriers, so insurance carriers, so I work at Guardian, a lot of insurance carriers do have central resources that have all of the information for all the states. So working with your employer to figure out, okay, which carrier is managing my benefits, that will help with kind of guiding you where to go, right? So if Guardian's handling the benefits for your company, then you could reach out to Guardian and kind of get all of that in one place. Unfortunately, the states are all so different. It's tacky, but I always say that they're like snowflakes, right? Like you've seen one, you've only seen one. They're all unique. So you really do have to, if you don't have that one-stop shop through a carrier, your HR team hasn't put together a tool to use, it really is kind of going to each state site and doing that research.
What do you recommend for folks that maybe don't have the best relationship with the organization, or they're nervous about reaching out to HR and letting them know, hey, we are expecting, we're not ready to sort of either tell people, or, they're concerned about, I know there's some general job protection, but sort of, divulging that information, going to the employer website or the carrier is probably the most confidential way to go about doing that.
Yep. Yeah. And that's where you're going to get the most robust information. But I hear you, Iván, with the, whether it's, kind of feeling like they don't want to involve their employer right off the bat. The other piece that we've seen is just availability, right? Like sometimes you reach out to HR and it's crickets for a while because they're just swamped with so many things going on. So feeling like you really have that person to walk you through it, and that is hard. That is one of the challenges, right? Is that even if the information is out there, feeling like you have the support and that you can go and access that information is a big piece of it. I would say that, the company policies are one thing, but a lot of times they're written in jargon that, we understand in the industry, but I work with a lot of employers, and it's, taking a step back and consulting and saying, if you don't do this every day and you read this sentence about parental leave, what does it mean to you? And a lot of times, they're like, good point. So that's where I think the internet is your friend, right? And being able to get that support through that, those resources.
And just to be clear, if your company is situs in New York, but you live remotely in Connecticut, right, or some other state, the employer-sponsored plan is going to be, probably the same across all employees, right, or that subgroup of employees, and then the state that you would go find the additional information in would be the one that you live in, not the one that you work, where your company is housed. Is that fair?
I wish it was that easy. So it's generally based on where you work, not where you live.
Okay.
However, so I work remotely in New Hampshire, right? So, and my husband works remotely in New Hampshire. My company is headquartered in New York City. So I'm not eligible for New York City benefits or New York benefits by any means. I would be eligible for New Hampshire benefits because I work from my home in New Hampshire. That gets really tricky when you have hybrid work, especially in like the tri-state area in New England, where it isn't uncommon to live in one state and work in another. And that is where we have to go back to the state and determine okay, which benefits is this employee eligible for? It's usually based off of where their unemployment taxes are paid to. That's the general rule of thumb. But I can definitely walk through. I know, I've been alluding to all these benefits. So if it would be helpful, I can walk through like the different ones and kind of the key takeaways for each one.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that was my question. You mentioned jargon when they're going to their group benefits. What are they searching for? Is it FMLA, paid family leave, disability? What's the difference, and why is it sometimes one and not the other?
All of the above.
Yeah, D, all of the above. Yeah, absolutely. So let me start with the short-term disability, because that's the one that I feel like most employees are familiar with. They've heard of, maybe they've used it before, if they've had a surgery or something like that. So short-term disability is a company sponsored insurance policy that can provide income during a maternity leave. Now, the standard setup for maternity disability is 6 or 8 weeks based on delivery type. So 6 on we don't call it normal delivery anymore, vaginal delivery, and then 8 weeks for C-section. And the benefit percentage varies. So this is something that I also I'll talk about that later, but it varies because a lot of times, it might be 100%, but it's not uncommon to see it be 60, 66%, 70%, something like that. And then you will typically need to file a claim as well. So that's where you would work with the insurance carrier. Do that in advance. Don't wait until you actually go out of work. Do that in advance for a few reasons. One, so that once the baby comes, you don't have to think about it. You just call in, say, I had the baby, and that's it. The other reason is that if you have any complications pre-delivery, then you're all set up. So again, all you have to do is call and let them know, I'm on bed rest or whatever the scenario may be, and they'll get everything in motion. Now, short-term disability is generally not job protected. So it's paid, but it's not job protection. So that's where FMLA comes into play, and that's the Federal Family Medical Leave Act. That was enacted around 30 years ago in 1993, and that is the job protection. So that's 12 weeks of unpaid job protection and then restoration to your job, after the leave. There are eligibility requirements, so not everyone is eligible for FMLA. So those requirements are you have to have worked at least 12 months at your employer and at least 1,250 hours over that past 12 months, which if you work full time, that, you've checked those boxes. FMLA also requires at least 30 days notice, advance notice for leave. So another reason why it's important to file that disability claim, file that leave ahead of, when you're expected to actually go out.
And where would you file that leave? Is it on a federal website, or when you file the claim for short-term disability, that takes care of it? How would you go about doing that?
That will depend on the employer. So some employers handle leave internally, meaning that you would have to work with HR and they would handle that unpaid FMLA for you. What we see kind of best practice and what we do at Guardian is we would handle the disability and the family medical leave. So you'd call into the carrier, you'd call into Guardian, and say, going out on leave, and the carrier would handle setting up both that paid short-term disability claim as well as that job protected leave.
Gotcha.
So the FMLA does not pay any income. It's just protecting the job.
Exactly.
And the disability insurance that's paid, is that typically taxable as well?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's considered the taxable income. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the FMLA, it can be used for more than just the maternity leave, right? So bonding after the baby's actually born for you, for your partner, would be applied under FMLA. But again, it's unpaid. So great, my job's protected. But, we know from data and research that 6 in 10 Americans can't afford a $1,000 out-of-pocket expense or unforeseen out-of-pocket expense. So how do you justify, okay, I can take FMLA time unpaid, but now I'm not going to get a paycheck. And many Americans can't do that. So that's where these state programs come into play and these company programs. So for the state programs, I know, that's everyone always asks, oh, can I take advantage of that? So I'll just briefly list the states that currently have a program in place. That's California, Washington, Massachusetts, Colorado, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Oregon, Rhode Island, and the District of Columbia. And in 2026, that will expand to Delaware, Minnesota, Maine, and Maryland. So if you heard any of, if you live in any of those states or work in any of those states, definitely, consider that. Because that is a benefit that you should be able to take advantage of. And that
in addition to the disability, right? It's not that one, it's you don't have to pick one or the other, right?
Correct. It would be in addition to the disability, and a lot of times, so the disability is usually the 6 or 8 weeks. So this would be paid medical and family leave. So you'd get a portion of pay on top of your disability if you're not earning the 100%. And then for the family leave aspect, you'd get paid bonding leave as well, whether it's the birth or non-birth parent. So that is a huge kind of trend that we're seeing in the industry. Everyone's talking about it. Like I said, states continue to make announcements that they're going to be offering something. We've even seen within the past few years voluntary programs. So New Hampshire, I said I live in New Hampshire. We have a voluntary program. So it's not mandated. In other words, the employer does not need to provide it, but you can opt into it. So my husband elected voluntary coverage, and now he'll get an additional 6 weeks paid time off once the baby arrives.
That's great. And so short-term disability, you would typically file that with your employer and sort of the insurance carrier. Hopefully they'll take care of Family Medical Leave Act as well, right? That's the ideal scenario. And then after, let's say somebody has 6 weeks paid 100% through short-term disability. After that time is over, is that where the paid family leave will start? And you'll start to receive income from that for X period of time based on the state. And you'd have to go directly to the state to apply for that benefit. Is that how it works?
Again, I wish it was so cut and dry. So some employers do choose to work directly with the state. So you would go directly to the state. Or they can choose to work with a carrier who administers on behalf of the state. So kind of the gold standard in all of this is an employer that chooses a carrier to administer everything. So it's a one-stop shop for, the employee when they're going on maternity leave. But that it's not a requirement, right? So that's where you really have to take the time as an employee to figure out, where are my benefits coming from? Who's administering it? Because your checks may look different, right? Like you may get half of your pay from the state, the other half from your employer. So that's another, when people say like, something I wish I knew before going on leave, is just really understanding, one, their percentage of pay and what that check is going to be so that they can budget accordingly. And then two, where it's coming from. It may not be direct deposit anymore. It may be a paper check that's mailed to you, right? It may be lump sum at the beginning of your leave. It may be weekly or biweekly. So those are all different factors or considerations that you have to think through.
Yeah. So in an ideal scenario, you could work for an employer that will basically, you have a conversation, say, we're expecting around this time, they'd be able to set you up with short-term disability, help you file that claim, help you file FMLA, and then also paid family leave. Like that's an ideal sort of scenario. Amazing. And then a scenario where you work with someone or a company that maybe, doesn't have that sort of setup in place, paid family leave, that's something that you would file directly with the state if the
Exactly.
if that is not offered through your employer, not administered through your employer. Is that the right word?
Yep.
Administered?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. And not to add to the complexity, but supplemental health. And I say this to all my friends, like, I mean, I'm a geek when it comes to like these types of benefits, right? And my friends know that. But supplemental health is one of those things that people forget about when they go on maternity leave. It's one of those benefits that, oh, we elect during open enrollment because sure, maybe I'll have an accident, so I want accident insurance, or critical illness. Why not hospital indemnity? When you go on maternity leave, file your hospital indemnity claim if you've elected hospital indemnity insurance. That will be a flat amount that they pay to you for admission to the hospital, for any other treatments that you receive that are eligible for payment. So that's just a nice like little surprise, I feel like, for a lot of people, that you forget about it, and then it's like, oh, I'm paying into this benefit, might as well use it. So again, if there was a like takeaway or thing that people are like, I wish I knew, don't forget to file your supplemental health benefit too.
Yeah, that's a good one. I find we have 3 kids, so every time, and all of my clients have the same experience going into the hospital, just no idea how much it's going to cost. Like
Right.
couldn't even get like a range. It's just unknown. Could be nothing, could be like way too much. And I also have many clients who have been so frustrated that their income, like you said, was coming from multiple sources, was delayed many times because they couldn't figure out who's paying them or why they weren't receiving, the income that they were expecting. So I think setting the proper expectations, asking those questions ahead of time to the extent that you can get those answers is really helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm the spouse, right? So it's not even as bad for me, but I just imagine going through all of that, trying to figure all that stuff out while you're sleep deprived, feeding kid. Like it's like that's the last time, or that's the you shouldn't be focused on that, right? The idea is to be spending time with your family and not having to be worried about getting paid, which is critically important if you haven't set it up, obviously.
Yep. Yeah. The more you can do in advance, I think the better. And like I said, working with HR to help you understand that. I will say that a lot of the state programs do have different calculators too, because I talked about how every state's like a snowflake. They're all different in terms of what their benefit maximum is, how they're calculating your benefit. So those calculators they have on their websites are very handy to figure out, okay, how much will I get paid from the state? And then will my employer supplement it? The one piece we didn't talk about yet is those employer leave policies. So company paid parental leave, company family care leave. That's a trend that we're seeing kind of ignite within the industry, because it's really a good way to retain and attract talent. So if you think of, pre-pandemic, I know I had some friends that worked at like startups, and it was like, oh, ping pong Fridays, and like, we have a beer cooler in the fridge, which is like, okay, great, that sounds fun. But once you're working remotely, it's like, how can we retain and attract these employees and talent? And one way to do that, obviously, is through benefits. So we're seeing a kind of a boost in the benefit percentages that are being offered, the types of leaves that are being offered by companies, and these are employer-sponsored benefits. So the employer is completely, covering the cost, where a lot of those paid state programs, there's an employee contribution to those. So the employer benefits is a huge perk. I will say it's still, something that has opportunity to grow. I know the Bureau of Labor and Statistics reported that in 2023 it was only 27% of private sector employers actually offered a company paid leave program. So there is definitely opportunity for more there. But it's something that you do want to consider and see if your company offers that, whether you're the birthing parent or non-birth parent.
And one of the things that you had mentioned before when we had a conversation was sort of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Can you just kind of share a little bit more about that, sort of what it is, how it works, why folks should sort of be aware of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is actually something that is more recent. It went into effect in June of 2023. We love acronyms in this industry. So, PFML, FMLA, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, PWFA. And what it is it requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations for pregnancy related conditions. So, an example of this would be, morning sickness, needing more bathroom breaks, needing time off for medical appointments. So it provides that almost security in that I'm pregnant, I need an accommodation so that I can, leave work early for a medical appointment and make up the hours, later in the week. And as an employer, I need to actually review that and determine whether or not that can be accommodated. So that's huge for this population because, as I've seen firsthand, like there are mornings where it's like, okay, I have a meeting at 9 a.m. and I don't know that I'll be able to make it to that meeting at 9 a.m. just based on how I'm feeling. So having that kind of there to support you and not feel like there's risk of, losing your job or something like that is definitely helpful. There's also the PUMP Act, so another acronym, and that's more for when you return to work. That's Providing Urgent Maternal Protections Act. And I feel like that one actually makes sense, right? Pump, and it allows you to pump at work.
Sure. Yep. I'm glad that one actually is what I thought it would be.
Right, exactly. Yep. So that one is employers of all sizes are required to provide a reasonable amount of break time and a clean private space that's not a bathroom for women to pump for the first year following the child's birth. So that's another one that went into effect at the end of 2022. So there's a lot being done in the space to kind of bring this awareness and support around maternity leave. But again, a lot of these things are things that are newer. They're always changing. So employers may not always know, that know the ins and outs or nuances of it. And that's where like arming yourself with the information that you can is going to help.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Oftentimes I feel like, especially for smaller organizations, we might expect more from our employers. Sometimes the rules are changing and the employers just aren't equipped, especially if they're a small business, to even know that the information's changed. So having employees bring something to light for employers, is also extremely helpful, right? Saying, hey, listen, this is something that you need to be aware of. I need it as part of my my general rights. And it doesn't, I sort of, when I think about it, it doesn't always have to be a contentious conversation between employee and employer. It can be educational from employee to employer and vice versa. So my hope is, maybe it's not so, like I said, contentious. It could be just a dialogue of education and as a small business owner, like I'm not aware of all these things at all times and it's constantly changing,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's why like there is so much information out there, which is a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no shortage of information, and a lot of it is from valuable websites like the Department of Labor, the state, .gov websites that you can really rely on. That would be one tip of advice. Like if you are, after, listening to this, going out and trying to do your own research, make sure that you're looking at one, reputable sites, and then two, the date that they were published. Because like I said, this changes all the time. So if you're looking at something from even, 2023, that could be outdated at this point when it comes to information. So that's a big piece of it. And a lot of times, to your point, Iván, like HR teams update these handbooks once a year. So things could change for them too. My husband with New Hampshire, that being a voluntary program, he actually went to his employer and they were like, oh, you're in New Hampshire. That's great. There's no, benefits that you're eligible for, which makes our life easier. And he was like, well, no, I'm eligible for New Hampshire PFML because I opted into it. And they were like, New Hampshire doesn't have a program. So this is where, again, I was like, I do this every day. Like, this is, they do have a program and we did pay into it. And to no fault of their own, they have to keep 50 states straight.
Sure.
And, so definitely important to arm yourself with any information you can.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we talk a lot to our clients about is sort of evaluating their employee benefits package, right? So, when they find out that they're pregnant and starting to make a decision around open enrollment time, reevaluating, if they're two spouses or two partners, reevaluating sort of which health plan should they be on, which one's going to be more conducive for, the labor or their birth plan or whatever it might be, making sure that the anesthesia team, if that's the route that they're going, is actually covered by their by their health insurance plan. Oftentimes you think that because I'm going to X, Y, and Z hospital, it's covered, that, the anesthesia team is actually an outfit from somewhere else that's like privately contracted, right? So some of those things are things that we constantly advise our clients on. But this space seemed like a black box even to us, right? So I'm happy that we've been able to have this conversation. As we kind of wrap up, are there any other things that you think the listening audience should really take away? Any other resources that you think would be like a go-to for them?
Yeah, I think the Department of Labor website's great for FML, for PWFA, for all those federal programs. The state websites, like I said, work with HR. The other tidbit, I know I said one tidbit that, I would leave you with is the supplemental health insurance. The other piece is printing things out. Because if you're like me, you filed your leave through your, work computer, you used your work email, you registered everything through your work email so that you have it all in one place, which is great. But once you go on leave, a lot of times they'll turn off your access. And then you're kind of sitting there like, oh no, what's my leave ID? What phone number do I call? So have a little document, email it to your personal email, whatever it may be, so that if and when your access is cut off from your intranet site, from your work email, from employee handbooks, you have the tools that you need to, file or finalize any of your leaves.
That's great. Well, Garland, we really, really appreciate the conversation. Again, I think you clarified a lot of things even for us on this call, so it's been extremely helpful. I know the listening audience was definitely a benefit for them. So thanks so much for being with us. We really, really appreciate the time, and thanks so much.
And good luck with the rest of the pregnancy.
Yeah, seriously.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Keep us posted. And to you, the listening audience, thanks for tuning in. Please click subscribe below to be notified when we have our next episode. Appreciate it. And we'll be sure to let everybody know when Garland has her baby. All right. Take care, guys.